America's economy in 2025 looks like a circus tent collapsing under its own weight. National debt has blasted past $35 trillion. Housing markets are cracking with price drops of 40 to 60%, and major retailers are shuttering stores from coast to coast. Add in Trump's tariffs, a Canadian boycott gutting cross-border travel, and international visitors vanishing, and the fallout is brutal. States built on tourism, exports, and seasonal jobs are watching billions evaporate. Hotels sit empty, airports echo with silence, and souvenir shops slash prices to pennies. These are the 10 U.S. states on the brink of collapse as tourism crashes in 2025. Number 10. Maine. Maine isn't just losing tourists in 2025. It's hemorrhaging dollars like a harpoon strike to the state's economic heart. For decades, Canada has been Maine's lifeline, supplying nearly 1 out of every 4 international visitors and pumping close to $900 million a year into its seaside towns. But this year, those maple leaf license plates aren't showing up. Cross-border trips are forecast to plunge 9.5%, stripping away roughly $600 million in spending before the season even peaks. For a state that relies on tourism for nearly 16% of its GDP, that's not a paper cut. It's an amputation. And then there's the lobster war. Maine exports around $1.5 billion in seafood annually, but Canada just slapped tariffs on lobsters, wood pulp, and paper, industries that together account for $2 billion in state exports. That's not just a trade spat. That's thousands of traps sitting empty while coastal communities watch their paychecks vanish into the tide. Lobster rolls that were already gouging wallets at $35 a pop in 2023 now flirt with $42 to $45, pricing out even the most determined foodies. Tourists who do make it to Bar Harbor or Portland aren't snapping Instagram shots of lobster claws. They're quietly ordering chicken tenders. Hotel owners report summer bookings down 15 to 18%, the steepest decline since the pandemic. Every 1% drop in visitors equals roughly 1,500 jobs lost, which means as many as 14,000 Mainers could find themselves unemployed this year alone. That's equivalent to wiping out the entire workforce of Bangor overnight. Maine sells itself as vacation land, but in 2025 it's becoming evacuation land. Empty inns, overpriced lobster, and a Canadian boycott are converging into a perfect storm. And the scariest part? The tide hasn't even gone out yet. Number 9. Louisiana. Louisiana's jazz might still play on Bourbon Street, but in 2025 the cash registers are going quieter than a saxophone case after last call. The state's tourism economy, normally worth $19 billion annually, is bleeding out under the combined weight of tariffs and an icy Canadian boycott. Canada usually sends nearly 335,000 visitors a year, but arrivals have cratered. The state's tourism board warns that the boycott alone could yank $2 billion in spending this year, an economic gut punch equal to the entire annual payroll of Baton Rouge's hospitality sector. Hotels across New Orleans are reporting advanced bookings down 12%, meaning thousands of empty rooms at what should be peak Mardi Gras season. Every 10% decline in visitors costs Louisiana around 20,000 jobs, so this downturn risks vaporizing 24,000 paychecks in 2025. That's not just bartenders and bellhops. It's chefs, musicians, street vendors, and tour guides who live off the rhythm of visitor dollars. Tariffs have also slammed Louisiana's other cash cow, exports. Petroleum, chemicals, and agricultural products worth $65 billion a year face rising trade barriers, with Canada and Europe slapping retaliatory tariffs. Analysts warn up to $4 billion in export revenue could vanish, dragging the state's GDP down by nearly 2%. For a place built on festivals, food, and international shipping, the 2025 tariff war is a double hurricane, one storm shredding tourism, the other sinking exports. Empty balconies during Mardi Gras, silent jazz clubs, and half-filled shrimp boats aren't just bad optics. They're a glimpse of a state economy staggering under pressure. Louisiana has weathered floods, storms, and oil spills. But this time, the disaster isn't natural. It's economic, and it's landing harder than any hurricane. Number 8. Massachusetts. Massachusetts built its modern identity on brains, biotech, and booming tourism. But in 2025, tariffs are swinging a sledgehammer at all three. Economists at Boston University warn that sticking with the new trade regime could vaporize $12.8 billion in state growth and erase 79,000 jobs by 2026. That's nearly the entire population of Worcester suddenly out of work. All because tariffs kneecap everything from advanced medical exports to higher education enrollment. Tourism, the Bay State's quieter giant, isn't faring any better. International visitors normally spend around $24 billion annually, with Canadians making up a major slice. But this year, arrivals are forecast to plunge 20%, costing Massachusetts roughly $1.9 billion in lost revenue. Fenway ticket sales, whale-watching tours, and Cape Cod rentals are drying up. Bed and breakfast owners in the Berkshires say summer bookings look thinner than a maple leaf in November, while Boston's convention industry has already canceled events projected to bring in $350 million. Meanwhile, the state's biotech exports, normally worth $15 billion a year, now face retaliatory tariffs in Europe and Asia. For a region that relies on global partnerships, even a 10% slowdown could mean $1.5 billion flush straight out of Cambridge's labs and into competitors' hands overseas. Add it all up, and Massachusetts is staring at an economic body blow: shrinking exports, thinning tourist crowds, and a looming labor market collapse. Sweet Caroline may still echo across Fenway Park, but in 2025 it sounds less like celebration and more like a desperate attempt to drown out the silence of lost jobs and empty wallets. If the tariff war drags on, Massachusetts won't just risk recession, it could lose its place as the innovation capital of the East. Number 7. Michigan. Michigan in 2025 looks less like pure Michigan and more like pure panic. The state once thrived on two reliable cash flows: Canadian tourists driving across the border for cheap gas and fudge, and auto parts humming out of Detroit. Now, both pipelines are collapsing at once. Cross-border traffic through the Ambassador Bridge, normally carrying 10,000 trucks and 40,000 people daily, has dropped 11%, slashing hundreds of millions in sales. Mackinac Island's fudge shops, which rake in $24 million a year, are staring at unsold slabs like abandoned bricks. Even the legendary Grand Hotel, with its iconic 660-foot porch, reported bookings down 18% this summer. Meanwhile, tariffs have turned the auto sector into a firing squad. Michigan exports nearly $25 billion in vehicles and parts annually, and Trump's new duties have triggered foreign retaliation. Suppliers from Detroit to Kalamazoo are laying off workers en masse. Grand Rapids alone waved goodbye to 115 auto jobs in Q2, while statewide industry analysts warn that as many as 12,000 manufacturing positions could disappear by year's end. General Motors' latest quarterly earnings already plunged 35%, a collapse worse than the 2008 crisis on some metrics. Tourism is another gut punch. Canadians, who usually account for 28% of Michigan's foreign visitors, are staying home, driving a forecasted loss of $800 million in spending. That's enough to cover the entire annual budget of Lansing and still have cash left over. The fallout is clear. Fewer tourists, fewer paychecks, and fewer reasons to visit a lakeshore weekend when the highlight is an empty lighthouse tour. Michigan once sold itself on affordability and charm. In 2025, it's selling silence: empty hotel rooms, shuttered factories, and the echo of an economy grinding into reverse. Number 6. Alaska. Alaska, the last frontier, is finding out what happens when the frontier goes broke. The state's $4.5 billion tourism industry depends on cruise ships delivering over 1.6 million passengers every summer. But in 2025, passenger counts are down nearly 14%, leaving towns from Ketchikan to Skagway staring at half-empty docks. Each cruise visitor typically spends $1,100 ashore, so that's a projected $246 million loss in just one season. Shops selling glacier mugs and salmon jerky are reporting sales plunging 20 to 25%. Their worst numbers since the pandemic shutdowns. The ripple effects are brutal. Every ship that docks short of capacity means dozens of tour operators go unpaid. Whale-watching excursions in Juneau, Dog sledding tours in Skagway and Denali flight-seeing trips are cutting shifts. Analysts estimate Alaska could shed 6,000 seasonal jobs this year, nearly 10% of its entire tourism workforce. And it's not just tourists. Alaska exports nearly $5.2 billion in seafood annually, but tariffs on salmon and halibut have driven down overseas demand. Fishermen from Kodiak to Dutch Harbor report prices falling by as much as 22%, wiping millions from coastal communities that already struggle with high costs of living. Meanwhile, state revenue is being battered from every side. Oil royalties are flat, cruise taxes are shrinking, and local governments dependent on visitor dollars are staring at deficits. In Ketchikan, officials warn of a $25 million shortfall if traffic doesn't rebound by fall. Alaska has weathered earthquakes, blizzards, and volcanic eruptions. But this crisis isn't from nature. It's from empty cabins on luxury liners and tariffs strangling seafood. The last frontier is learning in 2025 that when the ships don't dock and the salmon don't sell, even the toughest frontier can feel abandoned. Number 5. Nevada. Nevada, the state that built its economy on neon illusions, is finding the house doesn't always win. In 2025, Las Vegas, the beating heart of Nevada's $63 billion tourism industry, is running on half-empty slot machines and deserted casino floors. Visitor totals through June are down 6.5%, equal to nearly 1 million fewer people feeding quarters into machines, buying $25 cocktails, or shelling out for overpriced Cirque du Soleil tickets. That shortfall alone represents about $1.3 billion in lost spending, enough to bankrupt dozens of mid-tier casinos and shows. The Strip is showing the cracks. Hotel occupancy rates are down 12% year over year, leaving thousands of rooms dark. Convention bookings, normally pumping $11 billion annually into the economy, are down nearly 15%, as international attendees avoid the hassle of tariffs, visa hikes, and sky-high airfares. Limousine drivers joke they now have time to take scenic drives, not because the scenery got better, but because the customers vanished. The real insult? Prices are still spiraling. A bagel on the Strip now runs $33, a bottle of water $26. Sticker shock that drives middle-class tourists elsewhere. Analysts call it a Trump slump, with retaliatory tariffs making international visitors rethink gambling vacations in the desert. Overseas high rollers, once dropping $50,000 a night, are staying home, leaving empty high-limit tables and pit bosses twiddling their thumbs. Nevada thrives on illusions, but you can't fake cash flow. Nearly 300,000 jobs statewide depend on tourism, and every percentage drop in visitors risks erasing 3,000 paychecks. Right now, 2025 has already put nearly 20,000 Nevadans on the edge. What happens in Vegas is supposed to stay in Vegas. Unfortunately, in 2025, what's staying is silence, and it's deafening. Number 4. Hawaii. Hawaii used to be shorthand for paradise. In 2025, it's shorthand for too expensive to bother. The state's economy leans on tourism for nearly $18 billion annually, but visitor spending is projected to crater by $1.66 billion over the next 2 years. Even worse, arrivals are expected to fall 4% in 2025, the sharpest non-pandemic drop in decades. The most devastating blow comes from Hawaii's MVPs, Japanese travelers. In 2019, they spent nearly $2 billion annually across Waikiki hotels, luau's, and shopping malls. Now, their spending is down 54%, and bookings for the next season are collapsing. For hotels, that means raising room rates by 12 to 15% to stay afloat, which only pushes more travelers away. A Waikiki resort that cost $350 a night in 2023 now lists at $420 to $450 before tacking on $60 resort fees and $50 daily parking. Families simply can't afford it. Cruise arrivals are also down 9%, and each ship typically drops $2 million into the local economy. That's tens of millions lost in port towns like Lahaina and Hilo. Restaurants report double-digit sales declines, while souvenir shops are discounting leis and ukuleles just to move inventory. Hawaii's export industries are no safe haven either. Tariffs on agricultural products like coffee and macadamia nuts, together worth $250 million annually, threaten to slash farm revenues by 15 to 20%. Even pineapple exports, once symbolic of the islands, are shrinking as foreign buyers balk at tariff-inflated prices. For a state that sells Aloha as its brand, the numbers paint a cold reality. Hawaii is pricing itself into irrelevance. Paradise isn't paradise when it costs $6,000 for a family vacation. In 2025, the islands aren't losing sunsets. They're losing solvency. Number 3. California. California, America's dream factory, is waking up to a nightmare in 2025. The Golden State's $150 billion tourism machine is stalling, and the numbers are jaw-dropping. International arrivals are forecast to tumble 9.2% this year, wiping out nearly $4.5 billion in spending. That's like erasing an entire Super Bowl weekend from the economy before summer even starts. For decades, California's tourist numbers only went one way: up. Disneyland, Hollywood, the beaches, the redwoods. The state grew accustomed to record-breaking years. Now, hotels are reporting 8% fewer bookings, wineries are warning of double-digit declines in tasting room sales, and coastal towns that depend on summer rentals are staring at empty calendars. Los Angeles alone expects 1.1 million fewer international visitors, costing the city $2 billion in lost revenue. Tariffs have turned the pain into a chokehold. California exports $175 billion annually, including tech hardware, wine, and agricultural products. Retaliatory tariffs are expected to shave off at least $12 billion in exports, threatening more than 80,000 jobs. Napa Valley wineries report exports to Canada and Europe falling 18%, while almond growers, normally shipping $4.8 billion a year abroad, are watching prices collapse under tariff pressure. Even Hollywood isn't immune. The film and convention industry, worth nearly $6 billion annually, faces canceled bookings as international partners pull out, citing higher costs and political friction. Times Square has Broadway, Los Angeles has conventions and film premieres. In 2025, both are suddenly quieter. California has always sold itself as a place of limitless opportunity. But this year, the state is selling decline. Thinner crowds, shrinking exports, and the first real tourism downturn in decades. The Golden State isn't glittering, it's rusting, and the shine may not return anytime soon. Number 2. New York. New York, the state that never sleeps, is suddenly dozing off in 2025. The Big Apple's tourism, worth a staggering $74 billion annually, is seeing international arrivals collapse by 17%, a loss of nearly $7.5 billion in spending. Hotel occupancy in New York City, normally above 80% in peak season, has dropped to 69%, with only 22.5% of rooms pre-booked through July. That's an 11% nosedive compared to 2024, and the steepest decline since 2009. Broadway, which usually generates $1.8 billion a year, reports ticket sales down 22%, leaving theaters with empty seats and actors staring into half-lit auditoriums. Fifth Avenue retailers are also hurting, with luxury store sales down 19% as wealthy tourists from Brazil, China, and especially Canada stay home. Each lost tourist equals thousands in missed sales tax, and state officials now warn that tariffs could siphon $7 billion from the broader New York economy by 2026. The job toll is staggering. Economists estimate as many as 280,000 jobs tied to tourism and trade could evaporate if the downturn holds. That's more than the entire population of Buffalo suddenly jobless. Restaurant workers, hotel staff, tour guides, Broadway ushers, all caught in the storm. And it's not just the city. Niagara Falls, which hosts 9 million visitors annually, is reporting Canadian arrivals down 15%, crippling local businesses that rely on cross-border weekend traffic. Upstate bed and breakfasts are watching cancellations pile up, while wineries in the Finger Lakes warn of a 20% export decline from tariffs hitting wine shipments. New York once bragged it was recession-proof, but in 2025, tariffs and collapsing tourism have revealed the truth. Even the Empire State can crumble. The lights are still on in Times Square, but they're shining on emptiness. Number 1. Florida. Florida, the Sunshine State, is in the middle of its darkest tourism collapse in decades. Normally, Florida's $112 billion tourism industry is untouchable. Disney magic, Miami nightlife, endless beaches. But in 2025, Canadian travel, which makes up a staggering 28% of foreign visitors, has imploded. Bookings from Canada are down 40%, leaving a black hole worth nearly $12.5 billion in lost spending. That's not just numbers on a chart. That's thousands of empty hotel rooms, shuttered souvenir shops, and bartenders polishing glasses for customers who never arrive. For every 10% decline in Canadian travel, the US loses about $2.1 billion nationwide. Florida alone is gulping down an extra large portion of that shortfall. Orlando's theme parks, usually the crown jewel, are reporting attendance down 15% year over year. Disney's Magic Kingdom has seen lines shrink by an average of 25 minutes per ride, a statistic that looks great for tourists, but catastrophic for park revenues. Miami, which usually hosts 16.3 million visitors a year, has seen international arrivals plunge 18%, costing hotels nearly $1.2 billion in revenue this season alone. And the bleeding doesn't stop with tourism. Florida exports nearly $70 billion annually, from aerospace to agriculture. Retaliatory tariffs are projected to wipe out at least $5 billion in export earnings this year, hammering industries from citrus growers to aircraft parts suppliers. Farmers already report orange prices collapsing 20% as buyers shift to non-US markets. The ripple effect is brutal. Analysts warn that as many as 180,000 Florida jobs tied to tourism and exports could vanish in 2025. That's like erasing the entire workforce of Daytona Beach. Sunshine may still be free, but beachfront mortgages, hotel payrolls, and Disney fireworks are not. In 2025, Florida isn't selling paradise anymore. It's selling desperation, and the buyers just left on the last flight out.